And I think we're live.
Yes, I think we are too. Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back to the Rant Tech Chat Show. It's been a while. I've got Juan Bagnell with me from SomeGadgetGuy.com, and we're going to have a quick chat about the last 12 months in tech.
Yeah, because I don't think anything really happened over the last. I mean, it was a surprisingly quiet year. The Galaxy S3 came out a little while back, and pretty much everyone gave up, and then everyone went back to BlackBerry, and I don't think anyone saw that coming. So everyone's just rocking BlackBerries again, realizing they all made horrible life mistakes going over to Android and iOS.
Yeah, well,
Really quite surprising.
pulled out my Nokia N95, and I'm rocking that bad boy again.
N95. Yeah, 95 was a brilliant phone, especially because here in the States we were sort of stuck with Windows Mobile at the time. So like N95 sort of represented that transition where the carriers started exerting more influence over what phones we had access to. And I mean, I got to play with the N95. It wasn't a phone I ever got to own, but that was a beautiful piece of hardware.
It had an excellent camera, really, really good camera. It was only 5 megapixel, but it was really, really good.
Well, and I think it also sort of represented that initial push for Nokia into that kind of multimedia, because I didn't come back to Nokia until the N8 came out, and it was largely because of the camera, because the camera on that thing is still a monster. There are very few phones that today can fully compete with the shooter on the back of the N8.
Was that the one with the 41 megapixel camera?
No, that was the 808. The N8 was a 13 megapixel image sensor, but it was also a larger than half-inch sensor. So it was a 1/1.8 inch sensor, which provided phenomenally shallow depth of field and just excellent low light capabilities. And I don't know, I don't think it was the first, but it was one of the few Nokias that had a proper xenon flash. So it had like the flash on the 1020 was a proper burst flash. For photography. So I mean, you really did have a camera that rivaled, that bested most high-end point-and-shoot cameras. Like it would have rivaled a Canon G series point-and-shoot easily when it was released on the back of a phone. And it was a really low-power phone, and it had pretty decent battery life too. And it also had that really kind of angular. It almost looked like a classic Dodge Challenger, muscle car lines, like really hard-edged, tapered corners and stuff, and it looked like it had been pieced together in Iron Man's laboratory. So it was an all-rounder that really brought me back to, especially to Nokia hardware. But it didn't get a lot of love here in the United States. And then it was the C7, and then they switched over to Windows Phone with the Lumia 800.
Yes, yeah, I remember that. I got a friend that works for Microsoft, and he said to me just before they did the deal, he goes, "Guess what? Microsoft's done a deal with Nokia, and it's all going to be Windows." And I said, "No way!" And it wasn't 6 months later that it happened, and yeah, I was quite surprised.
I mean, and I think it's been interesting watching that relationship sort of unfold or bloom over the last couple of years, especially now that we're starting to see the beginnings of the end for Nokia's hardware division becoming just a division of Microsoft. But yeah, I mean, I've really been enjoying Windows Phone. There's still that little counterculture rebel in the back of my brain that thinks it would have been amazing if Nokia had optioned like WebOS or some funky operating system like that to push some of their new hardware forward, especially after what happened to WebOS when they got bought out by HP. That was kind of a sad turnaround where that whole division got killed after 6 months.
Definitely. Yeah, and then bringing it back to the cameras on phones, that sort of changed the whole photography industry in a way. Everyone's got a camera now. It's in your back pocket, it's in your front pocket. It's so easily accessible, and not many people tend to carry the point and shoots.
Well, and I also think that there's something to be said for market disruption. The cameras that we started playing with on old candy bar phones were barely passable for sort of an emergency. I've got nothing else. I need to take a picture of this, and I can on this little flip phone that I got for free on a 2-year contract or something.
Yeah.
But it really has brought especially over the last couple of years. Like I just reviewed the Lumia 1320 and the LG G3S, like the sort of G3 mini mid-ranger. And the kind of and of course I apologize to your audience because I'm going to be doing most of my Most of my comparisons here in U.S. dollars, so the pricing is probably very different what you guys are used to, and
Incredibly different. Just think it's a lot more expensive here.
right. But in like for example, in the United States, a phone like the Galaxy S5 will run around $650 unlocked. The Lumia 1320 will run around 280, and the camera on the 1320 isn't gonna rival a flagship phone by any stretch, but it's kind of incredible how much camera you can get for less than half the price of a flagship phone unlocked, not on contract. Just you throw down $300 bills, you get 20 bucks back in change, and you walk out the door with a really reasonable experience that can shoot 1080p video and usable 5 megapixel stills. I think that's really become the biggest disruption for the photography industry, is that it's democratized imaging. You used to have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on even just a decent point and shoot camera, in addition to whatever you were going to be spending on your phone and phone service and the rest of your sort of tech ecosystem, your personal area network. And now you don't have to do that. Now most of the cameras on high-end phones will rival, if not surpass, what you can do on a several $100 point and shoot camera. And really, the only thing we haven't figured out is hardware zoom. And you've got phones like I don't know what it's going to be called internationally. Here we called it the Galaxy S4 Zoom, and that it's basically just a point and shoot camera with a Galaxy S Mini bolted.
Yes, we've got those here as well. Yeah.
What is it? The Galaxy K? Is that what it's called?
Oh, I can't remember, but it's I think it is the Zoom. I think it is the Zoom.
Oh, okay.
It's been a while since I brought that one.
In some markets, I think it's just another letter. But here in the United States, it was the Galaxy fill in the number Zoom. So that to me has really been one of the most exciting aspects. Is you can pick up a Lumia 1020 and have an uncompromising imaging experience. If you're investing in a flagship phone, a number of them are already shooting UHD video, and we're getting ready for the launch of the Note 4, which is going to bring Samsung's new image sensors, going to start pairing them up with optical image stabilization, and I think we'll have some truly competitive Android shooters to what Nokia has been able to do with camera design over the last couple of years.
I agree. Yeah. But in general, just having that extra camera there, just like.
Well, and it's not the extra camera anymore. That's what's so exciting, is that for a lot of people, that's their primary camera.
Well, exactly. I found it's overtaking me using my point and shoot just because of all the extra features. Like I'm currently using an iPhone 5S, and it's got the panoramic ability where my point and shoot doesn't have that. Right. And I love that feature. It's also got the slow-mo camera, and it's just things like that I've got in my pocket on me all the time. It's one piece of hardware. I don't have to carry anything extra around to have all that with me, which is the convenience of having it all in the one device, I think.
Well, and combined with the fact that even on the iPhone, which is usually very restrictive in terms of how it handles files, it's still ridiculously easy to share that content with other people. I mean, I've got a brilliant Canon SLR behind me right now, but if I go and shoot 4 or 5 gig of photos, I have to connect that to a computer and start chewing through them. I can't just instantly go into editing that photo or uploading that photo to another service. I've got to transfer that data first. And so I think that's also been one of the other aspects of this, where even in areas where they might only be building out 2G and 3G networks, there's usually Wi-Fi that you can log into or some other method of data connectivity that allows for a much faster and much easier dissemination of content once the content's been created. So not only are the tools cheaper and easier to use for the creation of content, the distribution of content has also been rocked by the rise of the camera phone.
That's true. And it's brought things such as Instagram have come up, the things like apps like Vine, Facebook's exploded with photos, Twitter as well, and it's just the rise of having the camera on the smartphone, which has brought all this into play for many people.
Well, and it evolved far faster than I think traditional camera companies were expecting it to, and I think it appealed to consumers far faster than I think traditional camera manufacturers ever thought that this would be a credible threat. It was one of those things where I really feel it was like 2 generations of phone that really convinced people that this could be their primary imaging device. mean, like when you look at where we were with the first generation Android phones to the Galaxy S3, I kind of really like lay the Galaxy S3 as one of those turning points for the industry in general. The
Mhm.
iPhone obviously launched us into an era of consumer smartphones, whereas before the iPhone, we were really focused on business and corporate use, and BlackBerries were for
Yeah.
email, for high power executives and drug dealers. And then, the iPhone walks in, and then all of a sudden, everybody has access to smartphone computing. I really say it was around the Galaxy S3 that we started looking at our phones as being not only primary and mission critical communications devices, but also primary multimedia devices.
Yeah, exactly. Most people, well, for example, I hardly go on my computer these days. I tend to use my phone for most things because I've got an app for everything.
Right.
Um, Browsing, whether I'm just Googling something, I've got an app for that, and I do it on my phone because it's with me all the time, opposed to turning on my laptop, logging on, making sure it's connected to my network, and then searching from
Right.
there. It just seems to be so much more convenient, and it's with me wherever I go, whether it's a phone or a tablet device. It's just the portability, I think, has really made that big push with society these days. People want to be connected, but they want to be connected all the time, which
Well,
is
I really look at whenever I'm sitting down in front of my desktop, it's usually for one of two reasons. I'm either like sort of needing to focus in a way that I can't if I'm on my phone. Or I mean, like I guess three. Like if I need something sort of workstation grade, like if I'm editing video, obviously I'm going to be sitting in front of my
oh, exactly.
desktop. But then also it's like real time strategy gaming. I can't do that without a mouse and keyboard. So if I'm going to fire up an old
Fair
copy of
enough.
Command and Conquer, then I need to be in front of my desktop for that. Because
Exactly.
even on a laptop, that's not as fun an experience.
No, well, that's true. Very true. Um, just when you mentioned Wi-Fi and things and that, like that before, I was just going to ask you, over in the States with your internet speeds, I know our speeds here are absolutely woeful in Australia.
Well, I
Google
mean, the
Fiber.
last time I was on your show, we got into a little mini debate about some of the publicly funded efforts in that your government was trying to initiate in rolling out more bandwidth for other companies to manage. And you were telling me on Twitter a little while back that that's been stalled again. Is that
Yeah,
what's
well,
happening?
originally we've had a change of government since in the previous government. The whole plan was to roll it out as fiber to the premises, so
Hmm.
everyone was going to have a fiber cable connected to their home regardless, and that's the way everything was moving. They were going to get rid of the old copper network, but the new government's come in with a great money saving idea, and they're now doing it fiber to the node. So fiber to the node meaning they're using the old exchange, and so from the exchange to your home, it's the old copper network opposed to having fiber directly to your home.
And there are tricks around that. I mean, we're still dealing with that in most areas of the United States as well, where you start talking about like cable companies rolling out DOSIS 3, which can burst you up into faster speeds, but you're never really going to get the sustained duplex of fiber to the residents. So that's disappointing to hear, but I mean, it should be an improvement. I mean, that's still going to be an improvement, but the bummer is, and this is exactly what I said when I was on the show last time, is if you don't do fiber to the residents, then as expensive as it's going to be even more expensive doing it later because you're going to have to dig up that trench eventually. You're going to have to dig up that ground and lay that fiber to the home at some point eventually. So if you already have the machinery and manpower on the ground, it only makes sense to kind of complete that last mile, else you're going to fall into the same trap that we did here in the United States. So that's
And
that's a bummer. I'm really sad to hear.
I,
I'm really
I
sad to hear
agree.
that.
I agree completely. But you can still get it to the premises if you're in an area where they're rolling it out to the node. I think it's about between $3,000 and $6,000 that will connect it directly to your home.
Oh, so residents have the option to sort of pay their last mile if they choose to.
If they choose to. But
That's
I
actually
don't.
that actually is a little bit better than what we have access to because if I go to my cable because our government is very hands off. We don't really have a very powerful regulatory agency for telecommunications here in the United States. So even if I wanted to, and because like I would happily throw 6 grand at my cable company to say, roll me fiber, bring it here now. I needs it for work. Grabby hands, grabby hands. I would do that, but I don't even have that option. We don't even have that capability. So unfortunately, it's still a ways off. But I'm sorry, you were going to ask me a question, and I think you were going to start talking of Google Fiber.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I was, and which sort of led on to the way the conversation's gone. Anyhow, I was going to ask whether they're rolling it fiber to the premises or fiber to the node.
A very, very, very limited communities, very select areas, and we're getting into some very visceral states' rights versus federal government rights here in the United States, regarding who should have power over plans to roll out and whether or not the citizenry should have the legal right to vote for their own publicly funded broadband access. And so it's getting to be a really sticky political issue here because the telecommunications companies in the United States have a tremendous amount of influence and a tremendous amount of power to sort of roll out legislation or to influence legislation in a way that would be beneficial for them when the populace doesn't always have the same access or mouthpiece to combat that. So, I mean, for example, we're talking about the two largest cable companies in the United States potentially merging, and the public sentiment is largely negative. I wouldn't say it's overwhelmingly negative, but it's largely negative.
Because it creates a
And
monopoly in the market, that's why. And then you reduce competition, which is.
well, part of the, and I'm glad you brought that up because part of the issues that we have here in the United States are sort of preferential zoning and licensing and state laws, which give an inordinate amount of influence to cable companies in a particular area, and then they can work out agreements between state and local governments so that they don't ever have to compete with other companies. So we have major cable companies. We've got like Time Warner and Comcast. It is exceedingly rare that Time Warner and Comcast are both in the same area. So they never compete against each other. So your options are a cable-based internet, which I think max speeds are probably around 300 down and 20 up, or DSL, which is still around like 3 down and 1 up. And that's not really competition. You can't tell me when speeds are 1/100th the speed of cable that's if I choose to not do business with Comcast, I can't go somewhere else. There isn't another company fulfilling that usage in that same area. I can move out of a Comcast area and move to an area that's serviced by another provider. But I don't really consider that to be competition, and I don't think many people, when you explain the situation to people, I don't think they would consider that to be competition, and especially in a country which prides itself. That was a pretty good Freudian slip there, especially in a company, especially in a country that prides itself on this notion of free market economics, almost Darwinian market worship in how companies should be allowed to succeed or fail. It's a little bit of a black eye for us in the telecommunication space because I think it could be better were we able to force some of these companies to actually directly compete with each other, because that's the only incentive that these companies have to improve their network. Whenever Google Fiber rolls into an area, uh, whenever a city is allowed to offer their citizens publicly funded broadband access, or whenever AT&T is able to roll out their new Uverse gigabit internet, all of a sudden companies like Time Warner and Comcast are very interested in cutting their rates or offering up faster service or improving their network. It's only in those areas that we see those companies actually competing. For most of the United States, it borders on collusive business practices where they don't have to do anything. They can maintain ridiculously profitable networks that require very little maintenance and very little upkeep. They don't have to worry about having good customer service for people who have problems, or you're trying to get your cable installed and it's the joke of, well, we can be there between 8 a.m. on Monday and 3 p.m. In the year 2017. So you just have to be waiting at home. And if we miss you, then you just won't get your cable package installed today, and we'll reschedule. And you're like, it's a very frustrating position for supposedly the inventors of the internet to be involved in, because it doesn't seem like there's going to be any way to improve it in the near term. It's going to be a very long term, and it's going to be almost sort of like I think it's going to almost be a sort of a cultural shift in how people interact with data. as more data intensive services come up. I mean, you can bring up Netflix as a perfect example. Whenever Netflix kind of gets messed with, about half the people go, oh, well, my Netflix doesn't work very well, I'm going to cancel Netflix. And the other half of the people are going, hey, why is my cable company throttling Netflix? I'm paying my cable company for fast service, and I'm paying Netflix for good service. The two should be able to work together so that I can stream my movies and stream my TV. And it's those people that will start to affect change, because they're the ones who are going to be really frustrated when other services are sort of halted by their cable companies. That
Exactly.
was a very long and rambling answer to say, no, we don't have fiber to the residences yet. Sorry, I went off on a soapbox there. Didn't mean to kind of hijack the show for politics.
No, that's all right. But at least it's giving an insight as to how things are running over there. And I just know here, like I can't wait for the fiber broadband network to roll out. Whether it's fiber to the premises or fiber to the node, regardless, I need something faster because I'm running on ADSL 2+, and the exchange I'm on is quite small. And if everyone's online, forget it. I virtually have no internet. I'm getting download speeds of between 1 and 2 megabits a second, which is
Wow.
not worth it. Really not worth it.
That's really rough. I mean, I mean, it's better than like ISDN from back in the day, but I mean, it's so frustrating because when we have these conversations, especially here in the United States, there's a city in Tennessee called Chattanooga, and especially for you Australians out there, I would highly recommend looking up the Gigabit City here in the United States, or Chattanooga, Tennessee, because they actually did manage to vote through for their city at the municipal level. They voted through for their city that they wanted to do a publicly funded broadband internet access. And they also got a grant from our Department of Energy, because we have some very serious concerns over our energy grid here too. It's a very aged grid, and we need to start revitalizing it. Like how power management works in the United States is kind of antiquated. So the Department of Energy was looking at that as, whenever you're rolling out fiber networks, and especially fiber to the residents, that is the perfect backbone to start doing a smart energy grid. So for areas of the United States that are experiencing high power draw, you can better redirect power to those areas. You can better pull and pool power and things like, man-made lakes. And then you have better resources for how energy is distributed from renewable energy, like wind farms and solar and tidal generators, if we ever get off our butts and start building some of those on our coasts. So the Department of Energy through them. I mean, and it wasn't an obscene amount of money. I think it was a couple $100 million, and they built out their own fiber to the residents network for the citizens of that city. And I think now they were the first city in the United States to get proper gigabit, so 1,000 megabits up and 1,000 megabits down,
Wow.
full duplex gigabit internet. And I think if you live in Chattanooga, you pay $80 a month for full gig. And then if you want TV service, that also goes through their local power company. And I want to say it's something like $120 a month. I might have those numbers wrong, for gigabit internet with a full TV package with HBO and whatever it is that you crazy kids are watching out there right now. Unfortunately, the rest of Tennessee voted to not allow the expansion of that project. So the rest of the residents of Tennessee are wanting to have access to this amazing service, which is through their power company. So the same company that they have to send a check to for their electricity is also the company that they just write an additional amount for, broadband and cable TV. And the conservatives in that state blocked any further expansion of that program. And then they went and turned to the FCC to try and block other states from doing similar programs in areas where people are trying to vote on having their own taxpayer-funded broadband network. So it's become a really ugly situation here in the United States. And what I've just vomited out there is a gross oversimplification of how complicated it's gotten to try and work through the political process to push initiatives like that forward. But it's been really frustrating, because I think there are a number of areas where we're sitting on dark fiber. The telecom companies in this country have laid a lot of fiber that's just going unused. And Google Fiber is going through kind of the same issue. They roll into a state and they say, hey, we would like to offer the service to residents, and there are a number of laws on the books in all of these different areas, which will literally prevent them from engaging in any competition with the established telecommunications industry in that area.
That's crazy, really, really crazy. Where I know when they initially were going to roll it out here, the government spoke to Telstra, which is the largest telco in Australia. They were asked to put forward a plan on what they were looking to do, and it was originally going to be fibre to the node anyway, but they took their time about it. They're quite arrogant about it, and the government turned around and said, look, you're taking too much time. We're going to do it ourselves. We're going to run it fibre to the premises. We'll just get it done that way. It's there. We own it. We'll then wholesale it out to all the retailers, so Telstra didn't have the monopoly on it.
And then any company can then walk in and do business. Any
Absolutely.
company can walk in and manage that section. And so there are a lot of people that I wouldn't even say we're a majority, but there are a statistically significant number of people that wish we could do the same thing here, where if we can't get competition and we can't get updates and we can't get upgrades and prices continue to rise without the service getting any better, we would like to be able to do something similar. You know, if they're not going to get it done and they're getting, you know, taxpayer breaks and they're getting preferred land and zoning deals, if these companies can't offer us more competitive access, then we've got to turn somewhere else.
Well, that was the whole idea behind it, was so the government could control the cost of it, because broadband internet here in Australia is really, really expensive. I mean, as I said, I'm ADSL2 and my connection sucks, and I'm paying $100 a month for unlimited download, and my download speed is rubbish. So I don't do a lot of downloading, unfortunately, just due to the speed. If I do, it's got to be late at night. I've got to set something up late at night. So if I'm downloading movies or games from my Xbox, I've got to set it up at night and go to bed.
It's like a really expensive exclusive restaurant, and it's very expensive, and the portions are very small, and the food is miserably bad. It's awesome.
Pretty much. So between, say, 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. weekdays, forget about it, because you got all your school kids are home from school, everyone's home from work, and what do? Jump on the internet, and that's when my speed gets throttled, and it's just not worth it.
No, I mean, especially for other people that you talk to too. I mean, again, not to get too hung up on politics, but I would absolutely recommend, especially people in other countries, check out the story of Chattanooga, Tennessee, because it really was this sort of supported by the local population. They wanted better options. They reached out to to the energy company because they wanted to put together a plan for a smarter energy grid, which I'm sure Australia could also benefit from as well. Yours probably isn't as in dire situations as ours is, considering the population density of some of our cities. But I still think that would be a tremendous benefit for you to be able to then also turn to your local elected officials and say, this is something that's important to me, not only for the business aspects, it will make Australia more competitive, not only for the personal aspects of providing better services to consumers and the government being able to sort of receive funds back through the management of these deals with other companies that can then compete in this tech sector. It also makes a lot of sense from an energy policy standpoint, where you will have much better control over how the country's electricity is managed. So you'll have better tools and more throughput and more bandwidth just to help that information make it back to control centers and to nodes and things like that. So it kind of makes sense on multiple tiers for people to continue putting the pressure on for these projects to roll out, because it provides more benefit than just, oh, I can stream my movies faster. I mean, you were saying, like, you know, from 5 to 7, school kids are getting home. What's going to make Australia more competitive in the long term? If your children have better access to information, if your hospitals have better access to information, even if your politicians have access to better information. I mean, it has a macro effect on all levels of industry.
It comes, a lot of it, what's happened has sort of come down to the government. The current government is a very backward thinking government, and I'm happy to say that because it's true. They're thinking, it's almost like they want us to live in the world of the 1950s, and you know, we're not there. We're far beyond that from now, and we've got to think ahead.
It absolutely makes sense from a short-term conservative policy. I mean, that I won't argue with. I mean, if you need to save money in the short term, you look at what you think is going to be sort of a fluff project, or if it's presented to a politician as, well, consumers want to be able to stream their movies faster, that's an easy project to cut. You know, but that's not really conservative politics. Growing up in a military family here in the United States, I consider myself to be very liberal. But I was raised in a somewhat conservative family, and I think one of the greatest lessons my dad would always try and impart on me was thinking long term, not thinking about the next fiscal quarter, but thinking about the next 10 years. And are there policies that we could be taking a look at that will be better benefit for Australia over the next 10 years? And I think an investment now is cheaper now. It's going to get more expensive later, and it will recoup itself in a number of different ways. Not directly. It won't recoup directly, and that's the big problem. It's kind of like public works and public transit systems, like they don't recoup themselves directly, but it helps every industry around them. And it makes that local area that is getting the benefit of better roads or public transit or faster data much more competitive in the grand scheme of things. So that really needs to be, I think, the major talking point. At least you have a functional government, whereas if we go and talk to our elected officials, they're in total gridlock right now. So even if we wanted them to vote on bills or to write new laws, we know that the two-party political system that we have is going to go into instant gridlock and just lock itself up completely. So there's really no hope for us making any substantial, more than just a token gesture of a change anytime soon.
Fair enough. It's similar to that here as well. Let's jump onto a few different products. In the last 12 months, Microsoft and Sony unveiled the next gen of gaming consoles.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts on that?
I still have not upgraded to either of the next gen consoles because the most recent game releases I've still been able to get from my trusty PS3, rocking some Destiny and some Skylanders right now. A couple Activision titles. My fears for this newest generation, the current generation, PS4 and Xbox One, is I don't think these are going to be the long-lasting investments that the PS3 and the Xbox 360 were. It's disappointing to me when I can pick up a tablet with a 2560 by 1440 resolution screen and game on it reasonably well. And I know it's not pumping out 2560 by 1440, but I'm talking about a consumer tablet, not a box that is a full computer which lives under my TV, whose only job it is to play games. The fact that our consoles are still struggling in some cases to render 1080p gaming at an acceptable frame rate is worrisome. I'm not saying it's a deal breaker, but this is one of the main reasons why I haven't invested in one, because I also don't feel that there'll be competitive boxes once we start looking at trying to pump UHD graphics out there. I mean, one of the next major purchases that my wife and I want to make is a 4K TV. So I'm still going to be gaming at 900p or 720p on a UHD TV in the year 2014 when my PCs are more expensive but have no issues pumping out at least 2560 by 1440 at 60 frames per second. Like, that's worrisome, especially for the amount of money that I'm going to throw at a box under my TV, for it to not be clear what my upgrade potential will be when we upgrade to a better TV is troubling. So that's been disappointing. But then also I think we're also sort of seeing the bite, where a standalone console isn't a sure buy for a lot of families anymore. Like, kids are getting into smartphones younger and younger and younger. It's very likely that a kid's first gaming device is not going to be a PSP or a Nintendo DS, but it's going to be their mom's iPhone or their dad's iPad. There's less and less need for a dedicated box that lives under your TV. And I think that's why so many of our consoles are now pushing out into being living room multimedia computers as opposed to gaming devices. So I'm actually not surprised that Sony had the head start. They sold more on the PS4. They launched out of the gates first, and they had the more compelling price point because they weren't bundling it with their camera system, and that Microsoft really hasn't been able to make up that difference. I don't think it's through any fault of the Xbox. I really don't. I think it's more the changing market that we find ourselves in, where the amount of money you need to dedicate to that gaming experience can be spent on a bunch of multi-use devices like tablets and smartphones that you can do some gaming on, and then they become mission critical communications devices. You don't have that same usage with a console. Its mission critical app is gaming. And if you're having fun playing games on an iPad, there's less and less reason for you to go out and spend a ton of money on not only a ton of money on the console, but then a ton of money on each of the titles that gets produced for those consoles as well.
Exactly, and here they're not cheap. When the Xbox was released here, I think it was released here a week or two before the PS4 was released. It was $600.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that's what I paid.
I mean, even like, because I can't do the exchange rate in my head, but you almost want to start saying like, hey, we'll take a vacation in the United States and buy one there.
Just about, yeah.
There were all those like stories of people trying to like run PS3 or PS4s up to Canada and stuff like that because of the price disparity when you started talking about international sales. And you guys still have it rough with like mature rated games, don't you?
Yes, yes. The government steps in quite a bit and either has them censored or blocks them completely.
Yeah, see that I have some frustrations with, because you know, in so many other aspects, like for example, like I think this is something that the Brits do really well on TV. Like after a certain time, TV is for adults. You know, they just sort of assume like if it's after 10 o'clock at night, you know, grown-ups are watching TV. So it's okay if we, you know, show a naked butt or people use foul language or something like that, because, you know, if you're an adult. If you're offended by that, you can just turn off your TV. There's none of this notion like here in the United States where we would even be like, oh, the children. Yeah, the children up at midnight watching HBO. Yeah, we really need to be worried about that. So that's one of the things that's really bugged me about the gaming debate, though, is that even here in the United States, where you can still buy, you know, mature and AO games, it's that the gaming is still has that stigma of being for kids, and so people don't understand. You'll see all stories on Reddit of people like, oh yeah, I stopped this lady from buying Grand Theft Auto for a 6-year-old, you know, or not being able to acknowledge that this game was made for grown-ups. So we don't need to protect children from it because our normal laws for not letting children buy alcohol and tobacco and rated X movies should apply to this, which is a for adults experience. Same thing, you go to a movie theater, you have rated R films, you don't need to protect children from them. We have accepted as a society that that's a movie that's for grown-ups. And so we still don't seem to be able to have that conversation with gaming, you know. The average age of a gamer is something like 30.
Exactly.
You know? Which means there are as many people under 30 gaming as there are people over 30 gaming. And until we start to realize that that's how diverse the market is, and that within that diversity you can make specific experiences for, you know, very specific demographics, then it's not going to get any better. So I feel for you guys, because that's sort of a silly debate to be having in this day and age, especially with as many politicians that I'm sure have grown up with video games in their lives at some point. Not being able to grasp that nuance has got to be supremely frustrating.
Incredibly. Like, I think it was Saints Row 4 was unbelievably censored here. It was delayed quite a bit due to the censoring, which is ridiculous. A few people were able to get bootleg copies across from New Zealand where they don't have the censor laws and they work fine here because it's the same region. But I heard of a few people...
That's even funnier when it's like your censorship just isn't even effective. When I can go and take a boat trip over to New Zealand and come back with like armfuls of this stuff and just pass them out, then you completely failed at being able to manage that morality police situation.
I did see on Twitter a few people had tried to get some of the game imported from New Zealand and it was stopped at customs, so they said, no, you can't have this here. So some got through, some didn't, which is a bit sad at the end of the day when you think about it.
No, but it's like the blue jeans market, you know, when people were like selling Levi's in the Soviet Union back before, you know, back before communism fell. Yeah, it wouldn't be difficult if you don't mind your game being opened. Yeah, I go over there with like a CD wallet and I can come back with like 30 copies of a game and sell them off here. I mean, like if you ever walked through like an airport and played the, you know, like what would it take for me to circumvent this type of security? Haha, let me think. You know, the idea of not being able to get video games overseas or something like that is kind of laughable. If I needed to get fancy, I'd even just bring some like CD printer labels and just like print a bunch of dummy labels and just stick them on games and be like, oh no, it's my awesome CD collection. Oh, look, it's Boys to Men, Cooley High Harmony. Yeah, that's what it is. Aha.
Uh, yes, and the customs over go, sure, that's Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
Yup. Gonna make you sweat till you bleed. CNC Music Factory, let's do this.
uh, it's crazy the way things are. Another thing I was going to ask you about was with the release of the iPhone 6 and the 6 Plus, the whole Bendgate thing with the bending of the iPhone.
Right. So
I
personally, sorry. Personally, because I got a review unit through one of our carriers. I have no relationship with Apple. I'm not big enough for Apple to ever pay attention to me. I'm persona non grata there, and I'm also not a huge iPhone fan. So first off, my commentary has to be tempered through that. I will flat out tell you that my bias lies with Windows Phone and Android for my preferred devices. But the iPhone 6 was kind of terrifying to use. 6 Plus, sorry, not the iPhone 6. The iPhone 6 Plus was kind of terrifying to use because it wasn't mine. I really feel that had I went out and purchased one, I don't know that it would have been as big a deal as what we've seen in people purposely going out to destroy devices. This is one of the most frustrating things about tech reviewing is you sort of get a fad and then everyone jumps on the fad and then you have this internet echo chamber effect where tons of people are sort of replicating this. And we had a lot of problems here in the States with jackass kids going in and purposely breaking iPhone display units. And it's sort of and you'll pardon my swearing here, but in the United States it's 11:30 at night, so I feel I can swear because probably no kids are watching. But it's one of those no shit Sherlock kind of situations where if you go out of your way to damage a phone, it doesn't matter any piece of electronics or gadget or whatever. It doesn't matter how well something's built. You will eventually succeed in breaking a piece of technology. I do feel that the structural integrity of the iPhone 6 Plus is most compromised at the volume rocker. So for people that are thinking of buying Apple's phablet, you just have to know that that's its break point. Where the cutout happens on the volume rocker is one of the least reinforced areas of the phone, and every single time you see someone do a Bendgate video, that's where they start putting pressure because that's where they get the most traction and leverage for actually bending the phone. I don't feel that it is a no-buy situation. I think this is probably a better problem for iPhone users to have than Antenna Gate was for the iPhone 4, where if you would bridge the antenna, the visible external antennas, you could kill the radio reception on the iPhone 4. But that's also with the provision that you might need to change your behavior using the phone. So if you wear pants that fit, this might not be a phone that you keep in pockets. It just might not be. Because we also can't gauge when you take a phone, when you take a phone and you go out of your way to apply pressure to 2 points to bridge, and then 1 point to act like a fulcrum, most phones are going to deform, break, or pop. But most phones made out of plastic can sort of be popped back. With the iPhone 6, the one thing we can't test with those types of, I'm just going to try and rank a phone right now, is what the effect of lower amounts of pressure over a longer period of time might be. There just really isn't a good pocket test. So, if you keep the phone in your back pocket for, 3 or 4 days straight, and you wear, some really nice form-fitting Levi's 501s, we can't develop a good lab test for that kind of deformity. I mean, Samsung put out a video with the Note 4 showing all of the different deformation tests they ran on the Note 4, and they actually do have like a butt machine which simulates sitting down on the Note 4 like hundreds of times in a row. And that's fine, but that's not a constant pressure. That's still an impact.
It's still you also got to think you've got body heat as well, which can make metal malleable as well.
Yeah, I mean that's another thing that and that's one of the big problems is metal is malleable. I mean, it doesn't matter if something makes metal more malleable. Aluminum is a very malleable material, and we can maybe criticize Apple for maybe not building the internal frame out of injection molded magnesium, which is a little more brittle and it's a little sturdier. But I kind of feel it's one of those things where if you want the larger screen device, and you want some of the benefits that come with it, like the better battery life and the optical image stabilization. I still think the 6 Plus is a good phone, but it might be a behavior modifying phone. That might be the big compromise. Every phone comes with compromises, and especially moving out of the smaller screen sizes that we've had on every other iPhone to date. iPhone users are going to have to learn what compromise means, because you no longer have the one thumb experience. You no longer have that really easy to reach all sides of the phone. So some of those gestures don't work on the iPhone 6 Plus. Like your Touch ID is a very delicate balancing act. You know, like I don't have the 6 Plus anymore, but this is the LG G Flex, which is almost identical in terms of dimensions. And so, you know, you've got your little LG symbol down there where the iPhone home button would be. Well, if you're holding the phone comfortably in a nice solid grip so you don't drop your super expensive phablet, how do you reach your thumb down to activate Touch ID? You don't. You have to kind of dance it down. Well, and that becomes precarious when you're holding a slab of glass that large.
That's
So, I
true.
mean, again, you're talking about, for the first time, while I'm super excited that iPhone users finally have a choice, they've never had a choice before. That, I think, is a beautiful step for iPhone fans. Welcome to the world of fragmentation, because app developers now have multiple screen sizes and multiple resolutions to support. But I think choice overcomes fragmentation, and that's why I've loved Windows Phone and Android so much, because we have all of this wonderful these wonderful variations in hardware. You can get really a device that's tailored for you, as opposed to sort of a single use device. But now you're going to have to start learning about things that we've been dealing with for a while on Galaxy Notes and LG G Flexes and Optimus G Pros and Lumia 1520s, which are the size of my torso. And that's like learning how to really incorporate the device into your lifestyle, as opposed to this device that was sort of built for your hand. Now you have to do things like, you know, consider buying a case when you normally would have kept the phone naked, if you're worried about
Absolutely. I
it
just
bending
think
in your pockets.
if you're going to spend that sort of money on a phone, like over here, I know the 6 Plus with 128 gig memory is about $1,200. So if you're going to spend $1,200 on a phone, spend the extra to put a case on it to protect it, because it's not a cheap device, and if you drop it, it probably will break.
Well, and actually, you know, that's one of the things that I think the iPhone will be really decent for, actually. I think it'll hold up really well for drops and scuffs. I think it's actually going to be a surprisingly sturdy phone for things like, you know, if you drop it from like waist height onto asphalt, for example. I think it'll survive better than most plastic Android phones will, especially in appearance. I dropped my LG G3 once from waist height onto asphalt, and there's now a tiny little crack in the upper corner of my screen, but the entire backplate of the phone just looks like it aged 6 months in that one drop. Scuffs and scratches and gouges, and it's just such a cheap plastic that LG puts on the back of their phone. I love what LG's doing in terms of cramming cool technology into these phones, but I think if you were to drop an iPhone and an LG G3 from ear height, the iPhone would probably survive better. Unfortunately, if you kept the G3 and the iPhone 6 Plus in your back pockets and you sat down on them and you know, like you took like, I don't know, like a 3-hour car trip with both of them in your back pockets, I think the LG would likely not come out as deformed as the iPhone would.
Fair enough.
So you again, I really think iPhone users are really going to have to start weighing. I take that back. All smartphone users right now should be weighing not what device has the best stuff, but what device has the compromises you can live with. If the compromise is putting on a case and you're like, no, I can't put a case on my phone, I want the like slimmest, sleekest phone, the 6 Plus is probably not going to be for you. You'll probably want to look at the iPhone 6, maybe even just sticking with the iPhone 5S for a while, or moving over into one of the other Android mid-rangers, or maybe one of the smaller, the Galaxy Alpha or the Sony Z3 Compact, if you want that smaller form factor but still premier phone experience. But that's now, I think, the question that I think a lot of people should be asking themselves is, what is this device going to ask of me, and how is this device going to change my behavior, and what compromises am I going to have to deal with, and can I live with those compromises? Yes. Okay, well then that's the device for you. Doesn't matter if the phone has an amazing camera. If you're afraid to take it out of your backpack because you might drop it, then you can't really use your phone. You know, you spent a lot of money on something pretty.
Exactly. And here in Australia, we're known for fast adopters of new technology. So if it comes up, we don't think of that. We just buy it and then worry about it later. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting in trouble there. They're not thinking of those things. Is this the right device for me? But
Well, but that's also when smartphones made their push for the consumer market. Uh, they really became more emotional purchases. You know, when you got your BlackBerry issued to you through work or through a government job or through something like that, you know, that wasn't an emotional experience. It was, oh, hey, cool, I've got this email thing that now work sort of has me on on an electronic leash. So it's good and bad, you know, like I'm always on the clock now, no matter what. When consumers started buying smartphones for themselves, we really started getting into design and aesthetics and ergonomics and how pretty the software was and the entertainment and the multimedia. And that's really where this sort of explosion in pretty has happened. But I think for most people, I mean, I wouldn't say Australians are unique in this, in that most people are going to walk into a store and see a bunch of really shiny, pretty, glowing rectangles and kind of choose one based on largely superficial criteria. Um, if they're watching shows like this, they're probably smarter than the average baron, or game to have a discussion on specs and benchmarks and crap like that. How many megapixels are on the camera and how many gigaflips can the CPU do? But on the whole, that is not the bulk of the consumer market. You know, the bulk of the consumer market, they're going to go in there and they're going to see something pretty and they're going to say, oh, I like that. And that's what they're going to walk out with. And then they're going to have to deal with some of those consequences later. So it really becomes, you really do have a superpower if you're the techie or if you're the geek in your circle of friends, because you have that ability to kind of like, oh, what is it that you're really trying to do with your phone? If you're trying to do this with your phone, you might want to consider getting this phone. If you're trying to do that with your phone, you definitely want to stay away from that phone. You
mm-hmm.
know, and that's where I think, especially in that kind of geek to norm outreach, we have a lot more power over that discussion than I think we've ever had in the past, because everybody needs these things now. They're not just for geeks and nerds. This is mission critical communications gear for everybody. And so the geek have inherited the earth, which is pretty great.
Yep, I agree. I agree absolutely. Um, Windows 10. What are your thoughts on that? They brought back the familiar start button,
Yeah.
because I know you're a big fan of Windows 8.
Yeah. Okay. So I've played with the technical preview, and it's fine. It is. I mean, it is good. I was really on board Windows 8, even from the very beginning, even before we got Windows 8.1 and they fixed a lot of problems. I was one of the few people that seemed to really like the new experience that was being offered up, especially for touchscreen devices. It didn't seem to help non-touchscreen devices very much. And so I totally understood people's criticisms, especially coming from Windows 7, which is still an amazing operating system. It's still a phenomenal operating system. But now, having used it on a variety of different computers, some touchscreen, some not touchscreen, I really just have gotten used to not only the quirks, but the things that Windows 8.1 does really well. And as opposed to organizing and throwing files in places and going through a start bar to get to programs, Windows 8 is really more about local search. And so once you start getting in the habit of hitting your Windows key and just typing, you get to things a lot faster, in my opinion, than having to go and look through menus for things on Windows 7.
Mm-hmm.
So with Windows 10 now reintroducing the start bar, for me, this really looks like a defensive gesture on Microsoft's part, as more and more companies are dropping Windows XP, but are afraid about retraining their workforce on how to use a significantly different UI for their operating system. And that to me seems to be the biggest push so far with these early previews, because we haven't seen Threshold, and you can still get to a mostly all touch enabled version of Windows on Windows 10. But the biggest changes seem to be a regression to the things that made Windows 7 popular, and really do seem to be defensive move to help companies that are getting off of antiquated systems into something that's going to be familiar for their workforce. For me, I still don't think we've seen the answer for Microsoft's mobile strategy. And that's going to be Threshold, which I think we'll probably be hearing more about towards the end of the year or the beginning of next year, as we bridge app development for all screen sizes. So a developer can write one app and it'll show up on the Xbox, it'll show up on desktops, It'll show up on laptops, it'll show up on hybrids, it'll show up on tablets, and it'll show up on phones. And that's when we'll be into something really exciting. Because if you can bring me some of the features from Windows RT onto a phone like the Lumia 1520, that's really exciting. Like the way that RT can do split screening of apps natively. It's not something that Apple can do. It's not something that any Android outside of a Samsung can do, and it works phenomenally well. Where if I even have a Surface RT, I can keep a Twitter client docked really, really skinny on one side, keep a web browser up on the other, and that's how I covered a lot of stuff on CTIA this year. It's a trade show, and that's when the iPhone 6 and the Apple Watch announcement hit, and I had a web browser streaming me video and a Twitter client off on the side, and then my phone over there to do some Google Plus stuff. And I was just railing through blogging and Twitter and on a consumer grade tablet. I didn't even have a laptop to do it on. So when we can start doing stuff like that on our phones, I think that'll be really exciting. And then, like I said, it'll give developers one point of access. So it'll be a little bit more enticing for developers to say, hey, I wrote this one app. Now it's everywhere. As opposed to, I wrote this one app and it'll show up on Windows phones, which only have like 3% of the market. And then I have to take that app and mangle it so that it'll work on Windows PCs. And then I have to take that app again and run it through a completely different certification process so that it could eventually, maybe, hypothetically, someday show up on an Xbox. That's not a very good deal for a developer to support that much crap. And for that much grief, you can reach a larger share of people on Android. You know, dealing with the different models of Android phones that are out there. You can just do that and kind of be done with it. So Windows 10, it is a sort of a public preview, and you can really see that Microsoft is trying to get user feedback, user input, what's going to help improve it. If you like to tinker and your computer isn't mission critical to the point where some downtime isn't going to mess you up, I'd recommend playing with it, because I do think it's nice. But I think a lot of those changes, if you were not a fan of Windows 8, you'll probably like this better than Windows 8. If you were a fan of Windows 8, it's going to be kind of a shrug, because it's not really going to improve upon the touch experience that we've started getting used to in Windows land, and it's going to kind of knock you back to Windows 7.
Fair enough. Do you still have the start screen though, or is that completely gone? It's just the new start menu.
So in Windows 10, when you hit the start key, it's really designed to use that start menu experience, but you can toggle back. Like in Windows 8 right now, what you know how you can boot directly to the desktop.
Yep.
You can go into your menu settings, you say, I want to boot directly to the desktop. It's the traditional desktop, and the Windows key just takes you back to the start screen. In Windows 10, there is a way to toggle it so that it is more like that start screen experience, but the initial experience of using Windows 10 is like the start menu in Windows 7. So there are still ways to kind of engage with that Windows 8 experience, but that really hasn't been focused on. That's not really much improved or much different from the Windows 8 experience that we've been using so far. The big changes have been sort of returning to the desktop, bringing us windowed apps. That is actually kind of cool. Your apps are now windows on the desktop. Things like that we've been sort of twitchy about. But those changes haven't really reflected the direction that I was hoping Microsoft would go to with the Windows 8 UI and bridging, the sort of touch, non-touch experience. And for hybrids, if you're using a laptop with a touch screen, I don't think Windows 10 is going to feel like any kind of phenomenal upgrade.
Fair enough.
But that's why I'm hoping that as we get closer to the actual consumer release, that we'll see some of that polish make it so that we will see new features and we will see updates for those people that are on primarily a touch-screened experience. Because then I think you've got something really interesting. I really think that where this technical preview went was really to focus on business and corporate work first. And then they'll start working on polishing up some of the other aspects of the UI before it gets ready for launch. But that's just my speculation. I don't really have any good data on whether or not that's really what's going to go down.
Do you think Microsoft will charge for it, or do you think it'll be a free upgrade and they'll follow Apple's leadership in just allowing it to go out?
I'm pretty confident this is going to be a free upgrade, but this is also not going to be, because we're getting into branding here. Windows 7 wasn't really a new operating system. It was basically Windows Vista 2 or Windows Vista Point 2. It was a fix for Vista. But they called it something different because they got themselves into trouble with Vista. Vista was sort of an ugly name or an ugly word, So you couldn't just release, a service pack. It was tainted. The market, oh, I'm not going to buy that. That Vista stuff is awful. Oh, Windows 7, yeah, I'll totally buy that. That's new and different and better. And so Windows 8 is suffering from the same problem. Windows 10 is largely feels like Windows 8.2. We're talking about mostly UI polish at this point. We're not really talking about the underpinnings of this operating system feeling functionally or substantially different than even Windows 7, So I kind of feel like Microsoft really hasn't strayed too far from their service pack model. You would buy Windows XP and then your service packs were free.
Yep.
I kind of feel like that's the same situation here. Like Windows 8, sure, I had, you pay for a new computer, you buy a license for Windows 8, but then I got Windows 8.1 for free, and it kind of just makes sense to me that I'll get Windows 10 for free because that's really Windows 8.2, And especially because like all of these names are sort of nonsense anyway, because I think the actual build of Windows that's coming out is really like Windows 6 point something NT kernel / OS whatever. Like the naming has become completely nonsensical, and I don't know. If they charge for it beyond, say, so like I think if you're still rocking a Windows 7 box, you probably will have to pay for Windows 10. But if you're on Windows 8 now, I would be supremely surprised if Windows 10 wasn't a free upgrade for you guys.
Absolutely, yeah. I see your point there. Definitely, but I would like to see it be free and not have to pay for it, because it's like you said, it's virtually just an upgrade. I honestly thought they were going to call it Windows 8.2. I didn't think they'd go with a new name.
Well,
Uh,
and they couldn't just because of the media. They did not do a good job. I mean, this is Microsoft's biggest problem, really. It's not that I don't think they make good products. I think they do a horrible job talking to their consumers. And so when the initial launch of Windows 8 was so viscerally negative for how different it was, I think that caught them by surprise. And it didn't take a genius for them to say, you needed someone at Microsoft to say, hey, we're changing a UI that hasn't changed substantially since Windows 95. People are going to have a tough time with this, and you need to put boots on the ground. You need an army of people working at the grassroots level. You can't just go to The Verge and Engadget and say, hey, play with this and you're going to like it, we promise. Because you're going to get them giving this negative reviews, and then you've got millions of impressions of negative reviews coming from those major outlets. You needed to have people working one-on-one with consumers at every big box consumer electronics store, setting up kiosks in malls, making a media push with local news and working with newspapers. And like, that's exactly what Microsoft didn't prepare for their user base. It's exactly what they didn't do. So then the initial launch was this huge backlash against this different UI, and people couldn't figure it out how to use it, and just no conveyance, and I don't know what to do with my hands, and how does this work, and now they've got to walk away from it. Now they've got to call it something different. So you can't have Windows 8.2. At some point, I think you do need to kind of like move on from what free might be. And I don't know where you draw that line. I don't know if you bring Windows 7 users into the fold. Windows 7 was a different model and was a different pricing and is now older hardware. So I don't know if maybe a few of those underpinning updates might react weird on first generation Windows 7 machines, or maybe it won't run as smoothly because of some of the new fancier graphics in the UI. I don't know. You're probably more likely to have a computer capable of running Windows 10 well if you have a computer that's capable of running Windows 8 well. So you kind of maybe even want to encourage that sort of market sort of spread effect where oh, if you were looking at Windows 10, you should really look at buying it on a new computer, and that's going to help Lenovo and HP and Dell and Asus and Toshiba. So yeah, that's probably the best way to go about doing that. So I don't know. I mean, obviously you can't go back to Windows XP users because I don't think you're still rocking Windows XP on a
no.
computer. Windows 10 is going to be a good thing for you to install on that aged hardware. But Windows 7, maybe. I think that's doubtful. I don't think that's going to play. I think if you're on Windows 7, you'll probably have to pay for an upgrade. But Windows 8, like I said before, I'd be really surprised if Windows 8, if they charge for Windows 8.
Well, I know when Windows 8 first came out here, it was only like $60 to do the upgrade, which
Hmm.
is fairly reasonable considering Windows 7. If you got Windows 7 Ultimate, it was being sold here for about 500.
Yep.
So yeah, I think if they do charge for it, it'll be something reasonable like that, or maybe $50, $60, which is affordable and reasonable. And like I said, it comes down to your hardware as well. If you got old hardware, then you're definitely going to have to look at upgrading that, which is what I personally will have to do because the hardware I'm rocking came with Vista originally, and I upgraded to 7. And yeah, the next upgrade I will have. Like I've got a copy of Windows 8, but I haven't put it on here yet, just because I don't think my machine's powerful enough to run it at the moment.
Well, and also, I mean, for me, I'm a big fan of if it's working, don't break it. You know, like I come from a world of like high-end recording equipment, and you'd be surprised. You'll walk into some studios and see like Apple computers running 10.3, you know, because like that's rock solid stable for their setup. So, you know, they won't mess with updates, they won't mess with new drivers because everything's working perfectly as long as they don't touch or change anything. So, I mean, I'm kind of one of those like if everything's working the way it should be and you're not having funkiness, then don't go messing with it. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of interesting because I wouldn't consider myself like a Windows 8 evangelist, but I really think if you're wanting to move into what the future of computing, especially mobile computing, is going to look like, then I think Windows 8 is your best bet. Apple is not giving us products and solutions for blurring the lines between tablets and laptops. The Surface Pro 3 is a gorgeous piece of hardware. Lenovo's going to be coming out with the Helix soon, which is going to have a fanless computer all in the screen. So it's going to have an Intel Core M processor in like I think a 256 gigabyte solid state drive, all in an 11-inch screen that can then dock into a keyboard dock, but it's not a tablet, it's a full Windows 8 PC all in this slab of glass. And then when we start playing with stuff like that, it starts making some really and also at the low end. My wife just got a new Toshiba. She wanted like a little netbooky computer because she doesn't need anything super powerful. She's doing mostly document work. She's got some medical devices that she kind of needs specialty software for. So she couldn't just have like a regular tablet. So she couldn't just have like an Android tablet. And so for $200 here in the United States, you can pick up a full Windows 8 netbook tablet. And so she got a little Bluetooth keyboard for it, and she loves it. You know, it's everything that she needs to get done. She can watch Netflix on it. She can play Angry Birds on it. She can Skype on it. She can write documents on it. She can work on spreadsheets on it. It's full, real Microsoft Office, not some mobile version or some gimped version. And then she can also install custom drivers for other things that she needs to because it's a full PC. So when you start making that, when you start looking at that choice where for $200 you can get a Windows 8 tablet netbook that runs a full version of a full desktop operating system versus $350 here in the United States for an iPad mini, which won't have anywhere near that same capability, won't have upgradable storage, won't have the ability to use memory cards, won't have the ability to run desktop grade software. It puts I mean, it puts some of these more consumer-based products into a shorter life cycle, a faster obsolescence time period. And that's where I think the exciting stuff is going to start happening. When you can start blurring the lines between this fun entertainment device, this fun little tablet, and then something you can also get your work done on, or something you can also do some real writing on, or something you can install software on. That I think will get a lot of people a bit more interested especially because it's already happened at a price point that is ridiculously competitive against, uh, proper Android and iOS tablets.
Absolutely, definitely. Well, I think we might wrap it up on that point. We've been going for about an hour, so I don't know if I've still got anyone watching or anyone's going to stay and watch for this long. But if they have, thank you. Thumbs up to
Yes.
you.
And thank you for listening to me ramble for an hour straight on technology stuff. Before we go, because I've been dominating most of this conversation here. So you said you're on the 5S.
Yes, currently still using the 5S on a 2-year contract. So
So
it
I mean, but I mean, you're looking at the iPhone 6 and the 6 Plus. I mean, you're coming from the last premier small form factor phone. That's it. They're all gone now.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at that, because I'm sure you've played with other like Androids and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you thinking you might go phablet? Or are you going to stick with the medium-sized iPhone to have some of the better, slightly better ergonomics, or are you just going to run your 5S into the ground and then hope that something else comes out?
Well, I'm not looking at upgrading till next year because I'm still on contract, and then I'm not going to go phablet. No way, too big. Because I went to the shops and had to play around with a couple in the phone shops, and phablet's just way too big for me. Way too big. So I'm going to stick probably with something medium size, something that's a bit more ergonomic for my hand to hold. Like I don't have huge hands, but I mean, 5S in my hand is good. A little bigger I could cop, but phablet is just way too big. I might as well be holding an iPad to my ear and talking to that. It's yeah.
Because I know
And I carry
oh, go
my
ahead.
phone in my front pocket too, so I don't want something that's going to bend. So I'm going to have to look for something maybe a bit more robust than the iPhone next time round, maybe.
Well, I mean, then maybe you can look at it like a who would make something really robust. Oh, you could look at like a Kyocera. Those things are ridiculous. I'm playing with the Brigadier, and it's got a sapphire screen, which I'm really upset that Apple didn't go with sapphire for the display on the new iPhone.
I
Because
just think with Apple too. Sorry to interrupt. If
oh no,
they tend to when just before the 5 came out, the iPhone 5, they were talking about Apple had bought the biometrics company, and everyone's going, "Oh, there's going to be a fingerprint scanner," but it wasn't until the 5S came out that the fingerprint scanner happened. And if you think about it, this year Apple started building their sapphire crystal
well, because they've been using it
battery.
for the camera lens.
Yeah, but
So
also
your
they
camera
built
lens
it.
has sapphire on it.
That's true, and so does the Touch ID button as well. But a lot of the talk this year was it's going to be a sapphire screen, but I think that won't happen until the next iteration of the iPhone. I reckon my prediction is the 6S will have the sapphire screen.
So I think that if you're because I think it's kind of silly getting to play with all these phones. I think it's kind of silly to upgrade every year. I don't think the changes are ever big enough for a year-to-year upgrade on most phones, not iPhone specific, but on most phones. Like going from the Galaxy S4 to the Galaxy S5 doesn't feel as big a jump as if you'd been on a Galaxy S3 and you went to the Galaxy S5. That would have felt like this amazing upgrade. But if you're looking at Apple products, I really do think it's wise to be on the S path because they don't seem to change the guts and the tech as much when they change the form factor. So you've got this like tick tock, tick tock. You change the shell and then you make it more powerful. You change the shell and then you make it more powerful. And there is definitely a performance boost going from the 5S to the 5. I mean, going from the 5S to the 6. But I think the 6S will be where they address any potential build issues, just like with the 4 to the 4S. They addressed all of these antenna issues that the iPhone 4 had. Going from the 5 to the 5S, they addressed a bunch of battery issues that the iPhone 5 had. And I think going from the 6 to the 6S, it'll probably be a little bit more powerful. Hopefully, we'll see something like Sapphire on the display, or maybe something a little more rugged internally for the 6 Plus for people who do want to go with the larger phone. And then we'll probably see improvements to most of the radio management and the power management as well. I think that's where you'll actually see the guts get more powerful. It's not as sexy because it's the same shell, so a bunch of people already have phones that look like yours, but I think they tend to be better built phones after Apple's worked out their manufacturing kinks in the first generation of a new form factor.
I agree completely. You're better off to stick with that because, like you said, you've got all the issues are fixed up for that model, and then the following year that it's a different shape. So depends what you prefer, the performance or is it just the shape you're going for? And the
Yeah,
looks of the phone.
did you want the design? And that's actually totally fair too, because I don't think many companies make a better fashion phone than Apple. I can't use their products to get my work done. Like I need better file management on device just because I am one of those audio nerds and I have to have full access to a bunch of different audio files and the ability to control where those files live and go. Um, but you'd be hard pressed. I think HTC's caught up significantly, although I still don't think they have quite the same attention to detail. The Galaxy Alpha is pretty beautiful. It's the best looking and feeling phone I think I've ever seen out of Samsung. But it's still hard to say that any phone company really does unseat Apple from a design and aesthetic standpoint. So I mean, I think that is actually a very important point to bring up. Like, if you do want something pretty, it's kind of not a shameful thing to say. Like if you want something that's going to be attractive, you're spending that much money on a phone. You don't want a Toyota, you want a Lexus. Then you should be allowed to say that. But I still think that in terms of that blend of design and practicality of design and execution, that I still think the S path is probably the better path to be on.
Absolutely, I agree. Definitely. Less problems, less issues. I'm also thinking I might delve into Windows Phone, my next choice of phone. So I'm going to wait till the Windows Phone 10 pops out, and then I might definitely look at it then.
Well, I'm hoping we'll get some good news on it. Right now, Microsoft and what's the Nokia uh, hardware division seem really focused on the mid range and the low end. So, I mean, when you can here in the United States, pricing, of course, you can pick up a Lumia 635, an LTE enabled smartphone, which actually is a pretty snappy little device. It's not going to be great for gaming or watching high resolution video on, but to manage all of your social media and your email and to get all of your communication stuff done, you can pick up one of those for $100. You throw down
Well,
$100, not on contract. You own the phone and you walk right out the door and you can pop a SIM card into it. It's the Lumia 530 is practically a burner phone now. Like if you want to be a criminal and have like a throwaway smartphone, that's the one I would pick. It's like $50 or $60 here in the United States. It's ridiculous.
wow, that's
So
cheap.
I mean, it's getting crazy. And so then you've got the 730, which they're focusing on the front-facing camera, and then the 830, which it kind of has the same like 930 design, the metal edge with the plastic back, but it's a lot skinnier than the 930. And we haven't heard much news or any rumors really on what might be following for an update to their phablet. If we'll see a Lumia 1530 in the next couple months. I really hope that they come out with another mega camera phone. I mean, I went out on a nature hike again today, and the first phone that I picked up was the Lumia 1020 to take photos with. I mean, the camera is that good. And so it would be really sad to not have a follow up like a Lumia 1030, even if we're just like a limited edition model or something like that. That's something that I hope we still see because Nokia is one of the few companies that I think is as ruthless about design as Apple is, and they go about their hardware in a much funkier way, but they are, I mean, just visceral, just ruthless about colors and shapes and textures and materials in a way that no other company can. And sometimes it's a little overwhelming because like just in Windows Phone, not counting their Aja line and some of their other phone lines, you've got you can still buy here in the United States. You can buy the 520, the 530, the 635 on two different carriers. The 735 is going to drop. The 830 is going to AT&T. You can still pick up the 925, the 1320. The 930 is only on Verizon, and they might be retiring the United States version of the 930. And then I'm missing one. There's one other phone that you can pick up. Or if I didn't mention it, the 1520 is their phablet, which sort of exists at the high end. And so that's an insane number of phones for a market that Nokia had no presence in a couple years ago. A couple years ago, Nokia had no sales presence in the United States, and now it takes both hands for me to count off the number of phones that you can buy with Nokia badging on them. So I'm hoping that we see them still keep a little pressure on the high end, but I think for the short term, it's going to be low end, entry level, and mid range phones are going to be the primary focus there.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing I would like to see is them make a royal blue coloured phone. No one seems to do that anymore.
Or I mean, like they stopped doing because they had that really beautiful cyan,
Mhm.
the Lumia 900, and I had a review unit 900. I had a Lumia 900 in cyan. It was the first injection molded polycarb phone I'd ever played with. It felt like it was grown on a tree. And actually, hold on, I've got my 900 here now, but I had to give it back because they had so few of the cyan review units that I had to give it back to AT&T, and then they said later, it's like, oh well, you've been doing so much Windows Phone coverage, we have one other Lumia 900. Do you want it? And I was like, oh yeah, please send it back to me. I loved the Lumia 900, and they sent it to me in white.
Uh,
So it's just glossy, and it's not the matte finish, and it's no, it's not the same. But I still have it because it's still, I mean, it's still kind of a cool little phone, and it's kind of fun to point to in reviews, say, hey, look how far we've come. But yeah, I would love for them to go back to cyan. The new 1520 in green is almost assaulting on the eyes. It's this electric neon Hulk green. The orange is actually really sexy. I do like the Nokia phones in orange, but I would kill. You just have to tell me who you want me to kill and whether or not you want it to look like an accident or if you want to send a message. And I would maybe do that to get cyan back on our phone.
well, I don't understand why they took it away. It's such it will be a popular color.
According to, and I don't know how much of this was just PR speak, but according to one of my friends who worked for a Nokia PR company, that there was only one facility in the world, one dye facility that could make that color, and that they had monopolized this facility's ability to make this one color, and that it was actually like ridiculously expensive for Nokia to continue producing this color blue for their phones. That was the story they told me, and I don't know how true that is, but considering we've never seen it anywhere else, and it's a very rare color for plastics to be made out of, I guess it could be true.
Possibly, yeah. It's a shame though. I would like to see another blue one, or cyan.
Yeah.
Or even another shade of blue, not that light baby blue color, something like with a bit more depth to it, something a bit richer.
Yeah.
Should be quite nice.
Well, and I think that's also what's been kind of interesting with Nokia getting into Windows Phone has been bringing that design aesthetic, or that design ethic, I should say, where introducing color into our phones is a fun conversation to have. I mean, like, how popular was it for your old Nokia candy bars to get like different backs? So you could customize the back, and you could have like different skins that you could wrap on these things, and so. Like, I get it. Apple has white space, or I guess like now sort of a white silver and space gray and this weird champagne rose gold color. But what if you want red? What if because I really love the stuff that Motorola's doing. So like, what if you don't want glossy red? What if you want matte finished red? Or what if you want red with black accents? Or what if you want red with blue accents? Or what if you want the buttons on your phone to be yellow and the body of the phone to be cornflower blue? Like, that kind of stuff is so cool. And then you can start playing with different materials. Like, I want my phone to be made out of bamboo just because I can. That would be phenomenal. So I'm hoping more companies get hip to that, because I think Motorola is doing probably the most exciting job with Moto Maker, but obviously their phone line isn't nearly as popular as like what Samsung and Apple are doing. But I look at my LG, and my LG G3 has a removable back that is all scuffed to shit after one drop, and one short drop. It wasn't like I dropped it from ear height. And the plastic is just such a low quality plastic that I would love to them say, like, okay, well, for the G3, because the specs are so bleeding edge, we're going to put this out, and here's the back plate that we're going to put on it. It's just a regular common black back plate. But then you can go to lgbackplate.com and you can customize a back plate, or you can make it out of a matte finished material or a rubbery material if you want a really grippy back for your phone. We make a more rugged back. We can make one that's a waterproofed back that has a port cover for your micro USB port. I mean, I think there are so many markets. I mean, there's so many people that I think would take advantage of that if you had even a somewhat popular phone line. Like, the LGs are becoming really popular Android phones now. I think they're still the fastest growing Android brand. Giving us that choice, or giving us that option, could be really exciting. And you don't have to make that many of them. You just have people like sort of building them out or 3D printing them or whatever it is that you want to do. And then you could really customize that experience in a way that we haven't been able to do since the late 90s.
Exactly. I do remember the 90s with the 3210s and so forth, and the Nokias would change the front and the back, and everyone had a different one, or they changed the combination up, one color on the front, different color on the back. It was
Oh, totally. And I had, for me, it was like it was based on what sports were in season. And I had, like, my Red Sox casing for when baseball was in season. I had my Broncos casing for when American football was in season. I mean, I mean, it was just like the peak, and you'd be showing them off too, like, hey, I got the new Red Sox casing for this year. You're like, that's ridiculous. We spent so much money on crap like that, and like, we would spend that much. We would spend even more money on our smartphones now if you would let us do stuff like that.
Exactly, and that's pretty much where the accessory market sort of took off back then. You had your genuine face plates that you could buy, or you could buy the cheap aftermarket ones from the markets from, like, $5 or something, and it was a killer industry, and everyone had a different faceplate. I remember the first mobile phone I had was an Ericsson GA318, and I went to a phone store where they actually removed the original faceplate and put on an aftermarket one. It had this like blue, black, marbly effect to it, and I bought a battery to match it, and then an aerial to go on top. It was all cool, and it looked awesome.
Good times, man. Good
Yeah,
times. Well,
absolutely.
sir, it's past midnight here now, so I'm actually gonna call it. And I know I kept you on a little longer, so I wanted to ask you about what you thought of the new iPhone. But this has been fun. We should do this again sometime.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we'll schedule in a few weeks or a month or so whenever you're free, and we'll possibly same time that we started today. This time I will fix. I know how to work Google Hangouts again, so it'll work well this time.
Well, and I mean, like, we had some technical difficulties getting this thing started, but I think the show went rather smooth. I think we did well, and weren't any catastrophes on this round.
Absolutely. Did you want to plug your website, channel, Twitter?
Oh, absolutely. So, I am Some Gadget Guy. You can catch me somegadgetguy.com. That's the blog. I am Some Gadget Guy on the Twitters. I am Juan Carlos Bagnell on Google Plus, and then on YouTube, if you search for Some Gadget Guy, you'll find me. But then my actual channel is youtube.com/Juan Bagnell. And so, just like, if you see the little down there, the image of Optimus Prime, then you've found the right guy. And we can talk tech, we can talk phones, we can get into it, and we have a lot of fun. I've been having a blast, sort of sharing all of this tech goodness with the fine folks that have been watching my videos.
Absolutely. And I encourage everyone to check out your phone versus phone fight for blood reviews.
I hate doing comparison videos so much. So, like, for people watching, I hate with a fiery, burning passion of 1,000 suns. I hate unboxing videos, and I hate comparison videos. So when I do a comparison, I really do try to make it about usage and experience, not just reading off the specs from the side of the box. Because I trust, like, if you were smart enough to boot up a computer, open up a web browser, make it to YouTube, and search for a video comparing, what is it, the one I just did, the Galaxy Alpha and the LG G3, or a Galaxy Alpha, and which one did I compare it with? Crap, I don't even remember because I'm tired and I'm brain dead right now. But if you were smart enough and able to go through all of those steps to land on a video on YouTube, you're also smart enough to go look up Phone Arena or GSM Arena to read all the specs for yourself. You don't need me going off this, like, so this phone's got a 6-inch screen, it's 720p's with 13 megapixel camera with a speaker, and it's got a Qualcomm, it's a quad core. And, like, you don't need me to do that. So we can get all that stuff out of the way. I'll just trust that you went and looked all that up yourself, and we can talk about other things like ergonomics. How does it fit into your hand? Does it do what the manufacturer claims it can do? How do these features work? How do the cameras compare? And we can get on to a more nuanced discussion, because I hate when it's just this disembodied hand sort of like molesting a gadget on camera, and it's just not fun for anybody.
Well, you might want to unsubscribe to my channel, then it's all unboxing videos.
Nah, you're cool. I'll keep you. It's fine. You at least do talking head stuff too, because I mean, like, we just had an hour-long conversation about tech stuff, and not once were our hands molesting a gadget that you could see on camera. So I think we're all right.
Awesome. All right. No worries. Well, I will link all your channel, Google Plus, Twitter, and all that in the description on the video. So if anyone wants to check out one, go ahead and do. I encourage you to, and check out his long-term review videos on our mobile devices. They're always really, really good. And
Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Gadget versus Gadget, fight for blood. That's always a good one. Are you going to bring back?
It's total clickbait too. It's total clickbait. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Are you going to bring back Android Reads the Classics? Because that was good. I enjoyed that.
Oh, okay. So Android Reads the Classics was really just going to be a one-off because we had just made the switch. I don't know if you want to get really nerdy here, guys. Google separated out their text-to-speech engine so that it was a separate app that they could update for the voice that lives on your phone that reads things like turn-by-turn directions. And so that was just going to be a one-off, but I thought, I can have a little more fun with it. So instead of doing reading the classics, I started pulling one-star movie reviews. So purposely going to find like what was going to be a really popular film, like Godzilla or X-Men.
Oh, that was terrible. Godzilla.
Oh, I loved Godzilla. We can talk about this on some other show. No, I thought Godzilla was almost sublime. It was beautiful. But we can talk about that later. But then going through and pulling like all of the really the most angry, just poorly written one-star reviews, and then having the Android text-to-speech engine read all of those out, because it's sort of like it's such a pleasant voice to be having people like just savaging these movies. So I might go back and do a few more of those, but especially now that we're out of the summer movie season, it's a little bit dicier because if I do that and someone watches it, they might not understand that it's a joke. Like I'm going out of my way to find, like out of 1,000 reviews, 1%, less than 1% of them were negative, and less than 1% of those negative reviews were one-star reviews. If it's a more polarizing film, then it's just me kind of just pooping on a movie, and that's not as much. So I don't know if Android reads one-star movie reviews will come back soon, but I do have plans to produce a few more of those, especially whenever a movie is just like universally loved. Then I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna find all of those angry haters on Rotten Tomatoes and make another Android Reads one-star movie reviews.
Excellent. I look forward to it.
I think it'll be fun. And again, it's just another way for me to mess with people.
It's true. It's good. Yeah, I love the first one. Android Reads a Classic. Oh, it made me laugh.
Well, and for like this voice to kind of struggle getting through Frankenstein, we have a little ways to go before the voices in our phones can unseat voice actors for audiobooks.
That's true. Definitely. Okay, well, on that note, we'll both say goodbye and thank you for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this and want to see more. Any questions, drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new to the channel, and also to Juan's channel as well. It will be linked in the description down below. Till next time, thanks for watching. And